Yep, it should be good coming through.
No preview will go. Okay. Yeah. Yeah.
Cool. All right. Plenty of seats up the front if you're looking. But welcome, welcome back to CocoaHeads, everyone, for 2026. Here we are. I hope everyone had a good break. It's been a few months, but we're back and swinging for the new year. So to start with, as always, I'd like to acknowledge the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation, traditional custodians of this land, and pay my respects to elders past, present, and emerging. So I'll do a short housekeeping and then we'll get into the talk just like usual. But hello and welcome. So I'm Zach, and along with Christian, we run the event. So nice to have you along and thanks for coming. A reminder that there's a code of conduct that applies to CocoaHeads and also like online interactions like the Slack group. But the idea is to just be respectful, be inclusive, and be aware of fellow attendees. And if there's any issues or concerns related to that, please speak to myself or Christian. And of course, a thank you to our sponsors, without whom we couldn't run the events. So there's Billu, who are obviously in their offices tonight, and also Procreate, who help with our expenses. So a massive thank you to both of them for making CocoaHeads possible. I'll breeze past this, but just generally, if you have a workplace that might be able to host some meetups throughout the year, just come and have a chat with us if that's possible. We don't need any kind of commitment, but just want to see what options there are out there, because it's always good to have one or two venues up our sleeve. And yeah. But we have a Slack community. So if you're not in the Slack group, feel free to scan that QR code and join. It's more than just the Sydney CocoaHeads Slack group. It covers CocoaHeads across Australia and New Zealand. So there's a bunch of iOS devs from both countries in there. And there's a few good channels worth checking out, like General Jobs and Swift, for kind of general chatter about day-to-day iOS things. So we are on YouTube tonight. Just a reminder, the camera's over there. You can avoid it if you like. But otherwise, don't forget to like and subscribe. Anyone attending for the first time, well, welcome. We hope you enjoy, and thanks for coming. And as always, a shout out if you like what you see here tonight. Melbourne CocoaHeads do a pretty similar thing on the second Thursday of the month. They run on the third. But if you want more CocoaHeads, definitely tune into their live stream on YouTube. It's well worth it. Now, before I go away, is anyone hiring or looking for work and wants to give a quick plug? Yep.
Yeah,
Looking for work? Yep.
I just quit my job last year. I was looking after my daughter, a small one. So she is turning 2 now. So I'm thinking to come back now.
Cool. Or if anyone's hiring, you know who to talk to after the talk. So thank you. Also, if you want to post that in the jobs channel on Slack, you're more than welcome. There might be people hiring on there who aren't like here tonight. All right, looking ahead, next meetup, 19th of March, we'll be back here, I think is the plan. And we are always looking for speakers. Just assume that's true every month. Obviously, without speakers, we can't run the events. So if you have a talk that you might be interested in giving and want to run it by Christian or myself, please do that. Send us a message, come up to us after the event tonight. We don't need kind of firm commitments. We're happy to work with you on an idea. And even if you want to talk later in the year, that's also fine. But we do need kind of participation and talks. So it'd be great to have you talk. It's a good way to build some public speaking skills and presentation skills. So if you are interested in that, please do come and speak to us. Yeah. All right, before I go away, the schedule for tonight, we have one talk from Amy on visionOS and HealthKit, and then we'll stick around for a bit of a chat after. You're welcome to stay for that too. So without further ado, I'll pass it over to Amy.
Okay, let's see. Yep, actually got the screens around the right way. That's always good. And yep, clicker is working, so we're all good. Can go sort of hands-free. Anyway, recently I've been having a lot of fun playing around with a Vision Pro. So tonight's talk is called A visionOS of Health. This is, yes?
Do you want to give a quick intro about who you are for people who don't know?
I'll get there, Neil. I'll get there. What this talk will cover is my journey so far bringing an iOS app across to the visionOS platform. So, since Neil requested it, this is me. Hi, I'm Amy. I am an iOS, macOS, and even a visionOS developer. tvOS, maybe, watchOS, companion apps on iOS, done a bit of that. But these are the main focuses for me at the moment. You can find me online at a couple of unfortunately neglected blogs. I need to write a bit more. I will get back to it. Writing is actually a lot of fun, so I will be doing a bit more of that this year. Other stuff I do is a couple of indie apps. So there's HealthKitty, which is a chatbot and other sort of ways of accessing and working with your health data. And the talk tonight's going to be focused on that. There's also another app called Ride Journal, and Ride Journal is a way of tracking all of your cycling data. If you're on Mastodon, then my Mastodon handle is there. And like a lot of others, I'm always looking for more contract iOS, macOS, or visionOS work. Okay, so where are we going with this talk? Well, we will be looking at where did my data go? That is a fun story, that one. If you've been around for a while, you probably can guess what's going to happen here, but it's good to talk about it anyway. Going to talk about bringing stuff into focus. We're going to talk a little bit about I've fallen and I can't get up. And then, oh look, a squirrel. As well as that, just the graph, okay? And also what's mine is yours. All of this is going to make a lot of sense. It's just, I wanted to have a bit of fun with the talk. Okay, where did my data go? So you decided to use Swift data, which is always a good thing. You decided, yep, let's use a modern framework. Let's use something that is going to be compatible with Swift UI and modern ways of working. And you get to this point of, oh, you forgot to version your schema. Now, if you remember back to the old core data days, you can't just right-click on a file and go, give me a new version. You have to do a little bit of manual work in order to get things versioned. But thankfully, all is not lost because Apple provides you with this thing called a version schema, which is a protocol you can use. And what this does is allows you to create a type that acts as a bit of a wrapper around all of your data. So if, like most people, you've just got models floating around your code base outside of a schema, then what you can do is actually just sort of put them all into this schema without much effort. And that way it becomes schema version 1. And that will give you your initial point that you can then create schemas on after that. A lot of the magic with Swift data happens via lightweight migrations. And if you've just got your loose models outside of a schema, that will tend to happen fairly magically without your input. But okay, so now that you've got all of your models into a schema, you can then go and create a new version. This version is version 2. And for me, why I needed to create a version 2 is I wanted to get data from the iOS app across onto the Vision Pro so it's available there. A good way of doing that is via CloudKit, and you can have all of your data available there on both devices and synced behind the scenes as well. Now, a model that exists in a local device, you tend to do things like unique constraints or use class types as what you end up storing. So what this ends up meaning is to bring it across to something you can use CloudKit with, you're going to have to deal with migrating the data. Because it's not a lightweight migration, you're actually having to deal with, well, my data was in one format and I need to bring it across to another, then you're going to be in a situation where you'll need to do a manual migration or a complex migration. Swift data gives you to look online. All of the details that you tend to see in blog posts will give you an example of, okay, you're adding in a new property to your schema as part of version 2, and your complex migration is providing a default value, which works good, but it actually misses a lot of the use cases for migrations, particularly with needing to translate data from an existing type across to a completely new type. And you might have to do this like, okay, you've had it as an enum with some properties in there, but now you need to split that out into like a value and some other types in there. And this is where a migration actually makes a bit of sense. So what you'll need to do, if you look at the example there, is you've got the definitions for the models, you've got, or your versions, you've got the plan for actually going between the versions, and then I've created a thing called a store. The store is there so that data in the old format can be placed somewhere before it gets reinserted into the new format. So the way this migration works is you will have it'll run, and there are two closure blocks in there. You've got a, sorry, what is it? It's a will migrate is the unnamed one there, and that happens before your data changes. So this is your data in the version 1, where you extract all of those properties, and then the did migrate will run. So your schema has changed and you need to reinsert that data. Now, some people might think, oh yeah, we can just go, I'll store these properties off and access them again. No, you can't, because the properties no longer exist in the did migrate. So you need to actually store the data in its own separate type before reinserting it, and you need to make sure that you have identifiers there as well so that you can reinsert the correct data. Cool. Okay, enough about migrations. This is a visionOS talk, not a Swift data one. But more code, because when you're dealing with data, make sure you've got type aliases set up. You don't want to be dealing with like version 1 dot throughout all of your code. You don't even want to be dealing with current version dot throughout your code. You just want to be dealing with the models. So do something like this, where you're defining your current version and then you're defining your models with a reference to that current version. Enabling this all in CloudKit, you set up your configurations and your context. You make sure you provide it with the current version. Don't leave this as version 1 or whatever. Make sure it's set to that type alias so that when you update it, all of this Swift data stuff will update. You then provide it with a CloudKit container. In this case, it's the user's private one, and you provide it with the identifier that your app knows about, such as super secret container, because I'm not going to put my production stuff in there. That's just, yeah, not good. And if you do all of this, it'll work, and your data's going to be there on the Vision Pro for you and save you a lot of time. Cool. Okay. Moving on. Bringing everything into focus. So this is really where having access to a Vision Pro, so get your hands on them. They are amazing devices, but there is a big difference between simulator and the physical device that you probably don't realize until you've used a physical device quite regularly. So when I started doing this all in the simulator, this is what it would look like. And here you would see something like the button at the bottom there, which on an iOS device or an iPad would actually have sufficient padding applied. Here on visionOS, it looks like it's a little bit overhanging the edge of the modal there, which just doesn't look good and makes it very difficult to interact with. So, easy way to fix something like this is you go and you just add some padding in there. The magic here has been around since the first version of Swift UI, and that is our friend padding. Just a simple way of bumping things up a little bit in order to create some separation and make sure you can understand that it's an interactive element. Okay, another example. This is just it running as the code normally is on iOS. And we've got this nice styled text area there. But when you interact with that text field on visionOS, when you look at it, it'll give a hover effect of just the text field rather than the actual sort of container and the UI element itself. You'll also see that for a mobile app, I put the sort of submit or confirm button inside that container. And with visionOS, it doesn't really make as much sense because eventually you would have overlapping focus areas there, which just make it very difficult to determine which one should be selected. So, after a bit of playing around, this is what I came up with, where the two elements are separate, and when you focus on the text field, it's the entire container that is highlighted rather than just a rectangle of the text entry. How did I do this? Well, I used hover effect. Hover effect is a way to tell the system that when you are focusing, so looking at an element, it will gain an extra bit of appearance. By default, this tends to be a highlight, which just sort of visually brings it forward. You can also do a little bit more there, and I'll go over some of that later. But to achieve that effect, this again was using hover effect. Next one, more where the UI element is just right up against the border, not really that good and appealing, and you'll see that it is very difficult to understand the text at the bottom there. Not to mention that the text on the background in the simulator doesn't really look that great. There's little contrast between them. On a device, it actually looks really good. So just adding the extra bit of spacing there makes it all work. And we're back to our friend padding. So just sort of making sure that everything gets separated. Our next bit of fun is, well, what happens in something like this, where you've tripped, fallen, and you can't get up? This is a modal that gets presented. On iOS, the way to get rid of it is to swipe to dismiss, and that'll confirm the appointment. But on visionOS, you've actually got no way of dismissing the modal interactively. So you need to provide the user with something else in order to achieve that. How you do it is you put a close button in there, or you have some other interaction on the modal, like an OK, confirm, save, something like that, which allows the user to know that they're going to dismiss that modal. if you've used SwiftUI for a while, you've probably come across this dismiss action before, which will do the appropriate removal of that modal in SwiftUI, which is all pretty good. Next one. So for the graphs there, I went, yeah, the contrast really isn't good, is it? Sorry. Yep. This all looks a lot better on an actual device, trust me. But I'll also be making sure that I go off and fix up a lot of this for the next time. But yeah, so here the graph is done as a tab view with a paging control in order to interact between the different graphs which get presented. Doing that on visionOS doesn't really make a lot of sense. It's hard to interact with, particularly when a window can be resized however you want. Getting an interaction to sort of dismiss it is fairly difficult. So this is what I came up with, where the graphs are a lot more separate, and instead of using a page control or a tab view, it's just a scroll view with an H stack in there. So that works a lot better. The point I'm sort of trying to get at with all of this is that a lot of UI interactions that you think are good and nice on iOS maybe don't make a lot of sense on visionOS. So if you're bringing an app across to visionOS, make sure you have access to a headset, you interact with it, because even the simulator doesn't give you that touch and feel that you will get by using an actual Vision Pro. As I said, scroll view is how this all happens, because that's how you do collections in SwiftUI. Now, our wonderful ADHD friend, the squirrel. So in visionOS and Vision Pro devices, it's very easy to lose track of where your focus is on when you're using an app. And particularly if you've got some animation going on or something changes, then your attention will probably be drawn from where it is across to that item, whether you intend for it to happen or not. How this tends to happen is via hover effects. So the default one is highlight in a lot of cases, and highlight is just sort of giving an extra bit of visual emphasis to the UI element. For a lot of cases like buttons, this makes perfect sense, but you can actually do a lot more. So if you think about the tab bar on an app in visionOS, it's just the actual icons to begin with. But if your focus is on one of those icons for a bit, it then expands out into the name of the tab as well. In order to do something like this, you can use a more complex hover effect to do stuff like scales. You can, by scales I mean you can scale a UI element to be larger or smaller when you focus on it. I don't particularly suggest making it smaller, but make it bigger, give it emphasis to know that the user is aware that's where they are looking. And you can do this by creating your custom hover effects. This is another example where in this case it is taking the color red and then just affecting its opacity based on whether it's active or not. So you can get fairly creative with all of these hover effects in order to give your app a nice bit of look and feel to it. This happens via the hover effect content, which is a type. Some details there as well. Cool. Next one. And this was sort of my distraction this afternoon. Yeah, no, just the graph, okay? So visionOS and a lot of Apple's platforms support multiple windows by default. And how this can work on visionOS is when you, when you hover over an item, it can sort of bring it into focus. If you then interact with it, you can do something like take that element out into its own window and present more details if you want, a larger display, something that can be resized so you will give the user a bit more content. We're all familiar with window group in Swift UI apps. Window group was there from the beginning, but if you want to create a separate window, you can do that at the same app container level, which is pretty cool. In order to interact with it from your app itself, you can use the open window action, which is exposed as an environment variable. And this way you can sort of get a separate window out from your app. It's a lot nicer though when you think about it for immersive spaces. Now, this can either be like full 3D immersion, or it can just be something where there's a window with your content and everything else is dimmed. In a lot of cases for sort of data-heavy apps, that dimming of all other windows is probably the way you want to go. So you define the immersive space there at the app level. You give it an ID and, well, actually, sorry, you don't give it an ID. You give it a type that you want to handle the data for. And then in your app's code, so like on a tap gesture or a button, you can go open your immersive space and you provided the data you want. Now, this data needs to conform to Codable because it's going from one window across to another. And with particularly health data, if you're just using the raw health kit types, this doesn't conform to Codable for a lot of reasons. So, sorry. Yep, it doesn't conform. Health kit types don't conform to Codable for a few reasons, mainly because when you try to access the data, you go, give me this data for a unit, and that's a function call. So what you then need to do instead is have it so the data is sort of extracted into a struct or something like that, and then send that data across to your immersive space in order to display it. And it all works really, really well. Would have loved to get pictures here, but again, this was this afternoon's work rather than when I was preparing the slides. Okay, what's mine is yours. What I want to talk about here is the guest access on a Vision Pro or visionOS, where you as the owner have logged in with your Apple account, and say, oh, you've had it sync all of your health data across, and then you want your friend or your family member to use it and get access to the device. But particularly for health apps, do you really want them to have access to all of your health data on there? Now, there are some restrictions based on guest user mode, but they're not everything. So the person in guest user mode can still actually access all of your health data there, which is a bit debatable as to whether it's a good thing. But what they can't do is write data to HealthKit. So if you've got an app that, say, is a meditation app and you've just been through an exercise and it wants to output all of that data, if you're in guest user mode, you will end up hitting this error, which means it's not, you can't do a write to the HealthKit store, which is all pretty good because it's a different person that's performed the activity. So therefore, the data itself does not belong to that HealthKit store. Another one is, say, you've got a managed device. By managed device, I mean corporate IT has done all of the setup. They've got the control over it. They can actually restrict health apps on a Vision Pro. And if you try to do anything with HealthKit in such a condition, you will get this error, which is health data restricted. Pretty much means corporate has said, no, you can't do anything health related. The reason this is all important is in health apps, you don't always want your data to be accessible by other people. What would have been really nice is to have an ability for apps to detect when they're in guest user mode. And if they can do that, then they can provide an interface to the user that says, hey, you're in guest user mode, we've restricted all of the health data for privacy reasons. That would be really nice, but it's not something I've seen available just yet. There's always one in the crowd, isn't there? Okay, so let's recap a bit. Swift data, really, really good. Allows you to make sure you've got your data on both your iOS device and your visionOS device. Lots of fun and games with migrations and making sure your schemas are all right and good. Really big one, get a hold of a Vision Pro, just so you can actually know how the apps look and feel. Simulators are really good, but in this particular case, you really do need a Vision Pro. Padding and spacing are important because you want all of your content to be legible. So, yep. Hover effect, lots of fun. Make sure you are able to help the user understand where their focus is, what the interactions are. Immersive spaces, again, lots of fun because it allows you to bring particular bits of data or your app into focus and avoid distractions. Guest user access is something we're going to have to deal with. Already some good things there with the current errors. I will definitely be filing feedback. Don't you worry about that. And that is all that I had for the talk. Did we want to do questions? Happy to take some questions.
I'm interested in, did you end up using exactly the same view between your iOS and your Vision app, or did you have a completely separate path?
For a large part, the views themselves are the same. It's one of the really nice things about Swift UI is you can get away with doing it. What I found is by adopting a lot of the design language that works really, really well on visionOS, it actually also works really, really well on iOS. It works really well that way, less so if you go, oh, this is a mobile device, I'm just going straight across to visionOS. Stuff like the hover effect modifier, you do need to wrap in if OS macros because it's only available on that platform, but that stuff's fairly standard.
So you mentioned you reusing the same views. Does that mean like you've decided, like for the paddings, for example, does that mean you've decided to add the padding on the iOS side as well, or does it still look right?
Yeah. It actually looks a lot more consistent and a lot nicer on iOS as well. Obviously, your app's going to be a bit different from mine. Just make sure that when you're doing that type of stuff, you test both devices to see that, hey, this actually makes sense. It's what the users are going to expect.
First of all, thank you so much. This session is really informative, especially for me who never used Vision Pro or Swift Data or HealthKit. My question is, you have used the open window somewhere. I wanted to know more about the scenario in which case you need to use the that window groups open window. Like we can simply open content in a page or maybe in a model, right? But you have used open window. Is there any specific scenario where we need to use it with Vision
Okay,
Pro?
so the question is, when would you use a window as a UI paradigm instead of, say, a navigation push or a modal or something like that? It's going to be very specific to your app, and in some cases, particularly if you're going that step further for an immersive space, then having it as a window, as something separate, makes it a lot better. If you think about it, say in a Mac OS app or an iPad app, then being able to put two windows of the same app side by side is going to make a lot of sense because you're then comparing two different bits of data in there. Does that sort of give you a bit of an idea? Yeah.
I think we'll leave it there, but I'm sure Amy will be happy to take a question or two afterwards if you've
Yep.
got them. So another round of applause, please. Thank you. Right, that's the end of the formalities for tonight. Feel free to stick around and have a chat. I think there's a little bit more pizza and there's still some drinks in the fridge. So help yourselves to that. And otherwise, get home safely and we'll catch you next month. So thanks.
Thank you.